You wake at Zooey 5:30 in a ranch house outside Las Vegas. Your first action is making coffee in a kitchen that looks like every other suburban kitchen in America. Your second is checking your phone for the duty roster. You're scheduled for a 12-hour shift starting at a 700. By 0900, you'll have killed one of the most powerful men in the Middle East. By noon, you'll be home helping your daughter with her math homework. This is modern warfare. This is your life. You drive to work through morning traffic on Highway 95, past casinos, strip malls, and housing developments that all look identical. Your workplace is Creech Air Force Base, 45 miles northwest of Las Vegas. To anyone passing by, it looks like an ordinary military installation. Fences, guard posts, bland buildings that could house anything. But inside those buildings, you fight wars 7,000 miles away. You pilot drones over Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Somalia. You watch people through cameras that can read a license plate from 2 miles up. You fire missiles that arrive before their targets hear them coming. And you do it all from a chair that's more comfortable than your couch at home. You're an Air Force pilot, but you've never felt wind in your face during a mission. You've never experienced the physical sensation of flight. Your aircraft is a Predator or Reaper drone, depending on the mission. Your cockpit is a climate-controlled ground control station that looks like a gaming setup on steroids. Multiple screens, joysticks, communication systems, and ergonomic chairs designed for 12-hour shifts. The most dangerous thing in your workspace is the stale coffee. You joined the Air Force wanting to fly fighter jets. The recruitment posters showed F-16s and heroic pilots in flight suits. The reality was different test scores that qualified you for remotely piloted aircraft. At first, it felt like a consolation prize, like you'd been relegated to the B team of military aviation. Then you learned what the job actually entails. The training is extensive and surprisingly difficult. Not physically challenging like traditional pilot training, but mentally and ethically complex in ways you didn't expect. You learn to interpret grainy surveillance footage, to identify vehicles, weapons, and threats from camera angles that make everything ambiguous, to make life and death decisions based on pattern of life analysis and intelligence assessments, to fire weapons while sitting thousands of miles from their impact. The instructors emphasize precision and rules of engagement. Every strike requires authorization from multiple levels. Every target must meet specific criteria for engagement. Every mission is recorded and reviewed. You're not a lone wolf pushing buttons. You're part of a system designed to apply lethal force with legal and political oversight. At least, that's the theory. Your first missions are in Afghanistan. Taliban fighters moving through mountain passes. IED emplacements being prepared along roads. Vehicles transporting weapons to insurgent groups. The targets are small, distant figures on a screen. You watch them for hours, sometimes days, before engagement authorization comes. You learn their routines, their patterns, their associates. By the time you fire, you know their schedule better than they do. The first time you kill someone, it doesn't feel real. You see the missile impact on screen. You see the heat signature disappear. You file the mission report and drive home. Your wife asks how your day was. You say fine because everything you actually did is classified. You eat dinner and watch TV and go to bed. The disconnect is so complete it feels surreal. Over time, you develop a professional distance. The targets become objectives, not people. The strikes become mission completions, not killings. The routine becomes normalized, almost boring. Hours of watching screens, minutes of actual engagement. Then back to watching. You convince yourself this is more ethical than conventional warfare. No American soldiers at risk. Precision strikes instead of carpet bombing. Careful target verification instead of area suppression. The technology allows you to be more humane, more discriminating. That's what you tell yourself. Then, January 2nd, 2020 happens. You arrive for your shift expecting routine Afghanistan surveillance. Instead, you're briefed on a time-sensitive mission in Iraq. High-value target, authorization from the highest levels. The target package includes imagery and intelligence assessments you've never seen before. This isn't a mid-level Taliban commander or ISIS logistics coordinator. This is a state actor, a uniformed military commander of a nation-state. The briefing includes his name, Qasem Soleimani, Iranian Revolutionary Guard General, commander of the Quds Force, responsible for proxy wars across the Middle East, designated as a terrorist by the US, considered a hero in Iran. The intelligence assessment says he's in Baghdad for meetings, that he's planning attacks on American forces, that the window for engagement is narrow and fleeting. You're told this is a defensive action to prevent imminent threats, that the authorization comes from the president himself, that this is legal under existing authorities. You don't question it because questioning isn't your job. Your job is flying the aircraft and executing authorized strikes. The legal and political decisions are made by people above your pay grade. You're just the trigger, not the decision. The surveillance begins in the early morning hours, Iraq time. Your Reaper is already on station, loitering over Baghdad. You watch the airport and surrounding roads through high-definition cameras. Thermal imaging shows heat signatures of vehicles and people. The target is expected to arrive by vehicle after landing at the airport. You wait, watching screens while drinking bad coffee in Nevada. The target's aircraft lands. You watch figures exit the plane and enter vehicles. The convoy begins moving on the airport road. Intelligence confirms positive identification. The authorization to engage comes through. No hesitation, no debate, just confirmation that all criteria are met. You arm the weapon system. You designate the target vehicle. You wait for optimal position, minimal collateral exposure. The shot is textbook perfect. AGM-114. Hellfire missile, laser-guided precision, time from launch to impact. Seconds. The vehicle explodes in a fireball visible on infrared. Secondary explosions from ammunition or fuel. Heat signatures inside the vehicle go cold. Mission accomplished. You maintain surveillance for damage assessment. Additional vehicles destroyed in the strike. Multiple casualties confirmed. The target is definitely among them, along with several others in the convoy. You file the mission report with the detachment and precision you've been trained to maintain. Target engaged and neutralized. Collateral damage within acceptable parameters. Mission successful. Then you end your shift and drive home. The surrealism is overwhelming. You've just killed one of the most powerful military commanders in the Middle East. You've potentially changed the course of history. You've executed a strike that will be analyzed and debated for decades. And you're sitting in Las Vegas traffic listening to classic rock radio. You get home and your wife asks about your day. You can't tell her what actually happened. Your daughter needs help with fractions. You sit at the kitchen table explaining denominators while thinking about the denominator of acceptable collateral casualties. The news breaks that evening. Every channel shows the same footage. Burning vehicles on a Baghdad highway. Officials confirming that Qasem Soleimani has been killed in an American strike. Iran promising massive retaliation. Politicians debating whether this was justified or reckless. Your wife watches the news and says it's scary how close we are to war. You nod and agree, knowing you're the one who pulled the trigger, knowing that the geopolitical crisis unfolding on CNN started with your joystick input, knowing that you can't tell her or anyone else. The next days bring surreal cognitive dissonance. The news calls you a hero, except they don't know you exist. Iran calls you a terrorist, except they don't know who to target. Politicians argue about the legality of the strike you executed. International law experts debate proportionality of force you applied. And you go to work and fly more missions like nothing happened. The classification is absolute and permanent. You're not allowed to confirm or deny involvement to anyone, not your spouse, not your parents, not your friends. The mission doesn't exist in any record you can access. You're a ghost who changed history. The retaliation comes 8 days later. Iran launches ballistic missile strikes on American bases in Iraq. Al-Assad Air Base and Erbil are hit with dozens of missiles. Initial reports say no casualties, which feels like miraculous luck. Later reports revise that assessment. Over 100 service members suffered traumatic brain injuries from the blasts. Concussions, hearing loss, psychological trauma. Not dead, but permanently damaged. You watch the news and do the math. Your strike killed Soleimani and 6 others. Iran's retaliation injured over 100 Americans. The chain of consequences extends beyond anything you anticipated. And you're the first link in that chain. The weight starts accumulating in ways you didn't expect. Not immediately, not dramatically. Just a slow, grinding pressure that builds over weeks and months. You start having trouble sleeping. Not nightmares exactly, just restlessness. your mind replaying the strike footage at 3 a.m., analyzing whether you could have done anything differently, knowing that you followed every protocol correctly, knowing that doesn't make the weight lighter. Your job continues because wars don't stop for your psychological processing. More missions, more targets, more strikes. Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Somalia. The routine continues with the same professional distance you've cultivated, but something has shifted since Soleimani. The targets used to feel abstract, like video game objectives. Now they feel consequential in ways that make your hands shake. You start seeing the complexity you used to ignore. The military-aged males in target zones who might be farmers. The vehicles that might be carrying civilians along with combatants. The intelligence assessments that use words like likely and probable instead of certain. You've always known warfare involves uncertainty, but Soleimani made the stakes of uncertainty undeniable. Your strike was authorized, legal, and executed perfectly. It also sparked an international crisis and injured over 100 Americans. Both things can be true simultaneously. The therapy sessions start at your wife's insistence. She doesn't know what you did specifically, but she knows you're struggling with something you can't discuss. The Air Force provides counseling for drone operators. They understand the unique psychological challenges of remote warfare. Killing without physical risk, watching the results in high definition, then going home to normal suburban life. The therapist specializes in combat trauma despite you never being in traditional combat. You've never been shot at or felt your life threatened, but you've killed more people than most infantry soldiers, and you've done it while watching their heat signatures disappear on screen. The diagnosis is eventually classified under combat-related PTSD, which feels absurd because you operate from air-conditioned rooms in Nevada. But the symptoms are real, regardless of the cause. Hypervigilance, emotional numbness, intrusive thoughts, difficulty connecting with family and friends, a sense of permanent distance from normal life. The medication helps you function but doesn't resolve the underlying tension. You're a warrior who's never been in danger, a killer who's never been threatened, a person who's changed history from a desk chair. The contradictions don't resolve, they just accumulate. Years pass and the Soleimani strike becomes historical context. New crises, new targets, new operations. The news cycle moves on even though you can't. You're promoted and given more responsibility. You train new drone pilots in the techniques you've mastered. You emphasize rules of engagement and verification protocols. You tell them the technology enables precision and reduces civilian casualties. You believe this is true even while knowing it's incomplete. Precision doesn't eliminate consequences. It just makes them more targeted. Your students ask if it's hard to kill people remotely. You tell them the truth, which is that it's easier than it should be. That the distance creates a psychological buffer. That the screens and technology mediate the reality of what you're doing. You don't tell them about waking up at 3 a.m., about the weight that accumulates over time, about the specific strikes that haunt you years later, about Soleimani. You're 40 years old now. You've been flying drones for 15 years. You've participated in hundreds of missions. You've killed dozens of people, maybe more. The exact number is classified or simply unknown. Some strikes have clear body counts. Others have estimates and probabilities. You tell yourself they were all legitimate targets, that every strike was authorized and legally justified, that you prevented attacks and saved American lives. These things are probably true. They don't make the weight lighter. Your daughter is applying to colleges. She wants to study international relations and maybe join the foreign service. She asks what you think about American military intervention abroad. You give a carefully neutral answer about complexity and difficult choices. You don't tell her that you've executed more foreign policy than most diplomats, that your joystick inputs have shaped the Middle East more than most negotiations, that her college essays about American power are abstractions you've made concrete. She'll never know that her father changed history. She'll never know the specific ways or the specific costs, and you'll never be able to tell her. Your wife sometimes asks if you regret your career choice, if you wish you'd flown regular aircraft instead of drones, if the job is what you thought it would be. You tell her truthfully that you don't know what you expected, that the reality is stranger than anything you imagined, that you're proud of your service even while struggling with its weight. She accepts this because she loves you and knows you can't say more. But the truth you can't voice is more complicated. You don't regret serving your country. You regret how easy the technology made killing, how the distance created space for detachment, how the precision of weapons couldn't create precision in consequences. The retirement ceremony happens on a Tuesday afternoon. 20 years of service, multiple commendations, distinguished career. The general who pins your final decoration has no idea what you actually did. The citation mentions critical missions in support of national security. It doesn't mention Soleimani because that mission doesn't exist officially. Your colleagues know, at least the ones with appropriate clearances. They shake your hand with understanding that goes beyond words. They're fighting the same psychological war you fought, killing from distance, living with consequences they can't discuss, carrying classified weight. You leave the Air Force, but the missions don't leave you. Retirement means no more strikes, but the same memories. No more classified briefings, but the same secrets. No more surveillance feeds, but the same images in your head. You try to build a civilian life. Consulting work that uses your skills without requiring weapons. Hobbies that have nothing to do with military operations. Therapy that continues even without active duty stress. But you're defined by what you did, even though no one knows what you did. You killed Qasem Soleimani. You changed the course of Middle East politics. You sparked an international crisis from a chair in Nevada. And you live with that in silence. Because the mission is classified. Because the consequences are ongoing. Because there's no one who can understand except the handful of people who were in that control room. 10 years after the strike, you're watching news about Iran. New tensions, new crises, new potential conflicts. Analysts debate strategies and consequences. Politicians argue about proportional responses. And you think about the 7 seconds between missile launch and impact. About how easy it was to press the button. About how impossible it is to unpress it. About how technology made killing simple but living with it complex. You are the drone pilot who killed Soleimani. Except officially, you're not. Officially, the mission was executed by unnamed personnel using classified methods. Officially, you're just a retired Air Force officer with an unremarkable service record. Officially, nothing you did matters because it never happened, but you know the truth. You live with it every day. In the distance between Las Vegas and Baghdad. In the gap between joystick input and geopolitical consequences. In the silence of caring history that can't be shared. You changed the world from a desk chair. And the world will never know your name. And that might be the strangest burden of all.